In my country, 90% of press is under control of two oligarchs, gangster Vladimir Plahotniuk and President populist Igor Dodon. Independent press mostly survive and can work mainly thanks to donation of audience and grants of international Western donors. Market of advertisement too is monopolized by two oligarchs named earlier. Rise Moldova, the only organization which is not under control of local politics and business.
The most important problem for me in Armenian media field is that it's very difficult to get an answer from the responsible official after publishing your article. And even if you write very fact-based stories, you work on that story for a long time and there is nothing wrong in the article and it's very important topic and society is interested in it as well and it's a good investigation. Sometimes the article can be absolutely without an answer from authorities, and it's very devastating and it's very frustrating for every journalist who work for changing something in its society. They don't make obstacles during my working process. I can find information. Yes, it's sometimes very difficult to find proper information, but I can find it anyway, and I can write my story. But when they remain without an answer, it has the same importance as make some obstacles during your working process.
Arab media suffers from suffocating challenges, including all forms of repression and danger, from killing to imprisonment to banning of travel to being fired from the job, etc. Above all of this are repressive, harsh laws and aggressive practices. The challenges also include deep problems in the lack of training, the huge number of journalists who are not qualified, and the existence of centers of influence and power that dominate massive media spaces. I dream of a day where we have the freedom of expression. If we ever get that, we will do the rest of the job. Salute to all the brave people and every struggler with integrity who once sought truth.
So the situation with journalism in Russia, in general, it's been going worse and worse during the past years, and there are less and less oppositional media, and there are less and less news teams that work with investigative journalism. And now, apart from Novaya Gazeta, that is based in Moscow, there are almost no other serious teams that work with deep investigations. However, there are other trends that have been developed during the recent times. For example, when it comes to open data and data journalism, there are some new things going on, at least in Moscow and St. Petersburg. There are hackathons arranged on different governmental open data sets. Also, there is a new master program in data journalism based in Moscow, and there are some news outlets in St. Petersburg that work with data journalism and experiment in this direction, and these trends hopefully will develop more in the future.
In Taiwan, we have 24 hours, over 100 TV broadcasting station. But after 1987, the media is in blossom. We think that we have welcomed the democracy, we welcome the freedom of speech, and we think that the media can get free. But in the past 10 years, the commercial have made us, the reporters, become propaganda and become the tool of clicks. So lots of reporters, they lose their dignity. Even in Taiwan, there is a saying that if you don't study hard, you will grow up to become a journalist. So the society starts not to trust reporters. But this job is so crucial. It's society's integrity. Once you lose it, it's difficult to get a healthy and well-being society. So I think the freedom is not born to have. And we have another saying that there is one generation away from the distinction. The freedom is one generation away from extinction. Means that every generation have to strive for this freedom and the freedom of speech. So nowadays we have some good journalists, they want to do investigative journalism and in-depth feature stories to get back the reader's confidence. And one of, like a reporter, we call the reporter the institution. We are a non-profit organization, and then we are doing this. So I hope that maybe we will get things better.
In China, all the legal media are controlled by the government, and if the journalists want to report something the government don't like, their report won't be able to publish, or they will be fired, even detained or arrested for maybe half a year. And Chinese government is also promoting the control on new media and internet, so the works of the independent journalists are hard to disseminate. China even begin to censor the publication outside the country. So the report about the real China are even harder to be noticed and known by people. Chinese mainstream media are more and more unlike media, but the propaganda of the leader and Chinese government and party. More and more journalists are choosing to leave this business, and of course, there are some people are still remain in the medias. They are doing what they can do, reporting what they can report, even facing dangers.
In Uganda, the rights of journalists. A few years ago, let's say 10 years ago, we were a bit okay. We are doing fine. We were not being intimidated. We are not being followed up by maybe government officials, by state operatives. But in recent times, we see a situation where increasingly these state operatives are following up reporters, especially those ones who are doing critical work, those ones who are a bit hard on government, maybe programs, projects. They tend to take us as people of the opposition. We are sort of working for the opposition. If you're not working for the opposition, they think you are a foreign agent, you're working for a foreign government, something like that. And I don't think this is right. So I feel the freedoms of Ugandan journalists are being trampled upon at the moment.
From year to year, the freedom of press in Malaysia has been downgrading. Pressures from the government, politicians, individuals who are in power or think that they are in power. The existing legislations are amended and strengthened. From the printed media, electronic media to social media, all are not spared from the legislations. On the other hand, the solidarity among media has grown closer. The realization that at the end of the day, we are all the same. We are all journalists.
Actually, Nepal achieved press freedom only in 1990 after the restoration of democracy and ending of absolute monarchy. Constitutional monarchy was established. And at that time, both press freedom to aggregate, freedom of speech was established. Before that, journalists and politicians used to write articles, but it was done underground. Because if anybody, journalists and politicians were writing articles against the monarch, and if those documents got into the hands of the government, they would be put in prison. And they couldn't also, there was no freedom of speech, so no gathering was done. So in 1990, absolute monarchy ended, democracy was restored, freedom of press came into place. Then from then to now, till the whole journey of Nepal from 1990 to 2017 is very interesting in the sense, Nepal, before 1990, there was only the state-owned newspaper, radio and television. But since then and now, there are thousands of newspapers and there are lots of TV channels, and actually Nepal has done very good in the FM and community radio system. So the whole country, media has played a big role, and actually Nepal's press has played a big role in bringing this huge change from absolute monarchy to now a federal state. But what is very interesting that I must share with you is, so press has played a big role in the whole democracy movement. But now, unfortunately, when the country has shifted away from absolute monarchy to a republic state, and initially the politicians who were fighting for the rights of the people have started coming in the governing role, they have actually entered into corruption in such a way that corruption has increased, I would say thousands of times more, you see, so which is a very unfortunate situation. And of course, the press and the human rights organizations and individuals raise voice against this. So now these regimes and the politicians are trying to find different ways of suppressing freedom of press. They cannot do it directly because the Constitution of Nepal has given freedom of speech. We have right to information, freedom of information to the people. But how do we actually get it is a big question mark, you see. So there are ways of not implementing the laws and acts that we now have, which we did not have before 1990. But it's actually, there are now still cases where unseen way of controlling the press is there by the government. And on the other hand, before 1990, as I said, there was only state-owned newspapers, radio and television, right? But now the media has come as a corporate sector. So there are owners who are there to make money, right? So although there are editors who try to do the job the best they can, but there's censorship even from the owners who control the media that they are running. So it's very interesting. In a democratic republic, Nepal, there is a free press. There is a huge number of media houses, which wasn't there before. But there is an unseen censorship both from the government and the owners of the media house.
There's no journalist to conflict any power. For example, several journalists and media companies are intimate president, prime minister. They don't disclosure and publish power did what evil thing. So I hate several journalists and media company in Japan.
Journalism in Jordan, comparing to the countries around it, considered good for a certain distance. There is a law that allows the journalists to have information and sue the government in case they didn't respond or collaborate with topics and information they have requested them from. But in general, Arabic countries or Arab countries, they need to develop their laws and collaborate more with journalists in terms of giving them the information they need to write about them, and especially in the investigative journalism.
The government of Vietnam controls everything published on the media, and investigative journalism in Vietnam is well developed, but we just only, do investigation about some kind of social issues like food safety or the counterfeit, but everything related to corruption or the big corporations, private corporations that may affect the business in Vietnam or the investment to Vietnam, like big corporations like Samsung are censored, and the government controls those information. And in Vietnam, no journalist has been killed yet. At least, people know about the killing of journalists. But I still want a more freedom of journalism in Vietnam, and we want to publish more information to raise awareness among people and raise awareness of the government. And I wish you could practice journalism in your country more freely.
A lot of developments have happened in Indian media industry in the last few years. According to a news report published by the Hoot in 2012, at least 1/3 of Indian media was controlled under the direct control of politicians, which may have increased to some extent by now, and rest of the media houses are under the control of corporate houses. But there has been positive change happening in the last few years. That's a lot of independent media houses are emerging, and they are actually doing the job of free press, and they all have a good readership too. This apart, though India enjoys freedom of expression compared to other Asian countries, defamation has been a challenge for many of the media houses in the last few years. A lot of corporate companies and political readers, they file defamation cases worth 500,000 crores of rupees against a media house for publishing stories against them. For example, EPW or The Wire in the recent past have faced defamation cases. So fighting these defamation cases in itself is a challenge for Indian media, and like in many other countries, of course, they too, try to avoid such defamation cases at times because they can't afford to fight it always.
Freedom of press is threatened, even vanished, when the government and security officials have no place for criticism, when they use their power to criminalize people who consider as threats and mobilize their buzzers or influencers to criticize critical medias, when people choose to mock on the news instead of understanding the truth behind the news, when medias only think about their profit and refuse to seek and fight for the truth. And this happened in Indonesia. Not to mention the fact that low welfare of journalists and unindependent medias do exist. Then, what is the good side of Indonesia's press freedom? Apparently, there are still some medias and journalists who understand that their duties is to fight for the truth and loyal to the public.